When you picture a medieval castle, you probably imagine towering stone walls, soaring turrets, and grand feasts in candlelit halls. Maybe you see knights in shining armor, elegant ladies in flowing gowns, and roaring fires crackling under giant tapestries. The truth, however, is far more complicated. Castles were impressive, yes, but they were also cold, draughty, loud, and often very uncomfortable. Living in one was less like inhabiting a fairy tale and more like surviving in a fortress designed for war, politics, and power. The first thing you would have noticed about castle life is that it never stopped. Castles were alive with activity. Servants rushed through stone corridors with pitchers of water and trays of food. Blacksmiths clanged hammers against iron in the courtyard. Horses snorted and clopped their hooves in the stables. Guards stood watch day and night. The lord's family might have occupied the upper levels, but below them was a hive of cooks, pages, grooms, maids, clerks, and soldiers. The castle was more than a home. It was a small city wrapped in thick stone walls. Privacy was nearly non-existent. If you lived in a castle, you shared space constantly. Even nobles rarely had rooms to themselves. Servants slept nearby, or even in the same chamber. Curtains and screens offered a bit of separation, but thin walls and open doorways made secrets hard to keep. The great hall, where meals were eaten and business was conducted, was the heart of the castle, and it was always busy. Meals could involve dozens or even hundreds of people depending on the occasion, and everyone from knights to low-ranking servants gathered to eat, talk, and plan. Those meals might sound delicious in stories, but the reality could be hit or miss. Feasts for nobles often included roasted meats, pies, stews, and plenty of wine or ale. But the food was heavy, salty, and not always fresh. Spices were used to mask the taste of aging meat. Bread could be coarse and gritty with stone-ground flour. Fruits and vegetables were seasonal and rare in winter. People ate with knives, fingers, and hunks of bread to scoop up food. Forks were almost unheard of. While noble guests might sit at the high table, most diners ate on benches at long wooden trestles. Life in a castle also meant dealing with the elements. There was no central heating. Fires burned in hearths, but the heat barely reached the corners of large rooms. Stone walls were cold year-round, and in winter you bundled up or froze. Tapestries helped insulate rooms, but drafts still whistled through cracks in the stone. Windows were narrow slits, designed more for defense than for light, and glass was a luxury few could afford. Most windows were covered with wooden shutters or oiled cloth. During bitter weather, people huddled around the fire in layers of wool and fur. Water was another challenge. Castles sometimes had wells or access to nearby streams, but hauling water was labor-intensive. Bathing wasn't a daily ritual. In fact, it was rare. Nobles might bathe a few times a year in large wooden tubs, sometimes perfumed with herbs, but hot water had to be carried up in buckets and cooled quickly in the chilly air. Servants often went even longer without bathing. Instead of washing frequently, people relied on clean linen undergarments to soak up sweat and grime. Changing clothes was more common than scrubbing your skin. And let's not forget the bathroom situation. Toilets or garderobes were vertical shafts built into the castle walls, dropping waste into cesspits or moats below. Some were cleverly designed to use running water to flush the waste, but many simply collected filth over time. The smell was a permanent feature of castle life. Nobles sometimes used sweet herbs or flour-stuffed pouches to cover the odor, and rushes scattered on the floor helped soak up spills and smells, though they were rarely changed. In short, living in a castle was far less glamorous than it might appear in films. Despite the discomforts, castles were places of strategy and strength. Their design was all about defense. Towers offered a view of the surrounding land. Moats and drawbridges made surprise attacks difficult. The walls were built thick enough to withstand battering and fire. If you lived in a castle, you were protected from raiders, rival lords, and rebellious peasants. But that protection came at the cost of isolation. Many castles were built in remote or strategic locations, far from towns and markets. Supplies had to be carted in. Messages had to travel slowly. Winter could bring long weeks of being cut off from the outside world. Children in castles were raised to understand duty and hierarchy. Noble boys learned to ride, hunt, and fight from a young age. They were sent to serve in other households, as pages, then squires, before hopefully becoming knights. Girls were taught embroidery, household management, and courtly manners. Marriage was a tool for alliances, not romance. Noble children were pawns in a larger political game, often betrothed before they reached puberty. Their lives were structured, supervised, and shaped by the goals of their families. Entertainment existed, though it too served a purpose. Minstrels and jesters performed in great halls. Storytelling, music, and dancing brightened long winter evenings. Hunting was a noble pastime, as was hawking. Feasts could last for days, complete with musicians, jesters, and contests of skill. But even leisure had rules. Behavior was closely watched. Reputation mattered. Every gesture could be read as a sign of loyalty or disrespect. Castles were full of eyes and ears, and gossip flowed as freely as wine. Religion was central to castle life. Chapels were built into many castles, and daily prayers structured the day. Lords often employed their own priests or chaplains. Religious festivals shaped the calendar. Fasting, confession, and church services were expected. Piety was not just personal, it was political. A pious lord gained respect and influence. A rebellious subject who defied the church risked ruin. Even castle architecture reflected religious belief. Arched ceilings, stained glass, and carved saints reminded residents of the divine order above. Yet for all their grandeur, castles could also be terrifying. War was never far away. Sieges were brutal. Starvation, disease, and fire were real threats. Castles could become prisons as quickly as sanctuaries. Enemy troops could surround the walls and cut off supplies. Archers rained down arrows. Stone balls launched by trebuchets smashed gates. Boiling oil or pitch might be poured from murder holes above the gates. Siege warfare turned castles into battlegrounds and death traps. If you were inside during a siege, you had to hope your stores held out and your walls held firm. Even in times of peace, living in a castle meant living under constant rules. Your position was determined by birth. Your actions reflected not just on you, but on your family and your house. Servants had to know their place. Knights had to show loyalty. Women had to uphold virtue. Lords had to maintain order. The social system inside a castle was as rigid as the stone it was built from. Still, people lived full lives within those walls. They fell in love, celebrated births, mourned deaths, raised families, argued, laughed, and dreamed. Castles were not just symbols of power, they were homes. For some, they were the only world they knew. The child of a chambermaid might grow up learning to scrub floors in the same hallway every day. The squire polishing his master's armor might train for years just to earn the chance to fight. The lady of the castle might spend hours managing the stores of food and fabric needed to survive the winter. Life in a castle was hard, yes, but it was also deeply human. So while fairy tales might wrap castles in magic and wonder, the real story is far richer. Living in a castle meant enduring cold and discomfort, navigating rigid roles, and facing danger at every turn. But it also meant belonging to a living, breathing world of strategy, tradition, and resilience. Behind every stone wall and iron gate was a story of survival, ambition, and the ceaseless rhythm of medieval life. So now you know, living in a medieval castle wasn't all crowns, feasts, and fairy tales. It was cold stone floors under your feet, the constant hum of servants and guards, and the ever-present smell of smoke, sweat, and sometimes worse. Behind those grand walls were lives full of duty, discomfort, and the never-ending work of simply surviving. Yet people laughed there, learned there, and built lives as real and complicated as ours today. Castles were powerhouses, prisons, homes, and battlegrounds all at once. They shaped the world around them and the people within. If you've ever dreamed of stepping into a medieval lordess' shoes or walking the shadowed halls of a fortress, now you know it came with far more grit than glamour. If you enjoyed this journey into the raw, rugged reality of castle life, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell so you never miss another deep dive into the past. Got a historical topic you want us to explore next? Drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and remember, Behind every stone tower lies a story waiting to be told.